The biggest conundrum that they have is I want to buy my own home, but I'm either scraping the bottom of the barrel or I can't even buy something I really actually want to live in.
A lot of people in Sydney, they face the same pain point that you just brought up. They can't buy their own backyard anymore.
Capital growth is the game, but cash flow keeps you playing it. Very rarely will you find people our age buying stocks like CBA, BHP, Rio Tinto. Why? Because they are dividend yield stock. But there is a very strong reason why everyone our age are in the accumulation phase, are buying Google, Amazon, Tesla.
Interesting.
Why? Because they want to buy in at 10 and sell out at 20, and that is capital growth. So why would people treat the way they invest in property differently to the way they invest in the share market?
Mount Druit has outpaced cash, okay, by 20% since 2020. There was a mansion that sold in Mount Druit for $2.3 million.
I think I saw that.
$2.3 million. It's starting to become a market where if you take advantage of the land, you will accelerate your wealth quickly. Queensland or Victoria right now? It's $1 million question.
How long have we got? Okay, so
Welcome to the Finance Show with Joe. He's Joe, I'm Michael, and we have a very special guest today. JP, how you going?
thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for having me.
He's definitely special.
He's special.
I'm extremely excited to bring JP on because JP and I have been collaborating recently and just discussing how we could work together. He's got a very similar personality to myself, which you guys are about to get to know. But on top of that, he works in a new buyer's agency, or you guys have been around for about 18 months now. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. So just, I was just saying before, I incorporated the business in Feb of last year.
Yeah.
My background before that was actually working in tech. So I worked at LinkedIn for 5 years, some other tech startups and stuff. And then people often go, well, how did you get into that? I bought my first investment property back in 2018, I think it was. And I, had a good year at work, and I thought, I should probably do something with this. And I've got, my cousin who's a builder, other cousin who's an architect, his wife's a town planner. People are around.
You're not Arab at all, are you?
Has to be from Western Sydney.
Yeah, it has to be.
With that network. So since then I built up a portfolio, across Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. And I'm super passionate about anything and everything investing. So my business is called Investr.
How you nailed the name Investr, or simply dropping an O, is incredible.
I have no idea. I mean, I think the naming convention, I really like. I think because I come from tech, naturally they love putting the R at the end of something. You've tech company with Sipper with an R. I don't know, drink tech. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
You get my point. So, but the fact that I nailed the domain, I have no idea how I did that, but I just got lucky.
Same happened with me with It's Simple. Like, I had people ask me, they're like, itssimple.com.au was available. I'm like, yeah.
That's great.
I'm
crazy.
Genuinely surprised about that. So it's great to hear how you started off. The business is called Investr.
Yes.
You're focusing on investment
I
properties.
only work with investors. Yeah.
When did you recognize that was your niche?
Yeah. Okay. When I talk about my business, I talk about myself. How humble of me. And that's because I believe as a small operation with just me and one or two other kind of support staff, that the business is built around me and people's trust in me as a person, and people hopefully, trusting me enough to be doing the work for them to achieve the result. So, sorry, to come back to your question, when did I decide that was my niche? I am an investor at heart.
I am the niche.
Exactly.
Sorry, I went full Stallone there. Judge Dredd 97.
Liam's got the headphones. He's like, Jesus.
All blokes gone deaf.
Yeah.
So I'm an investor, right? So I said to myself, okay, the only way that I can serve people is in the way that I know best. And what I know best is property investing, right? And I made it my business to read the blogs, to listen to the podcast, to read the books. The first book I ever read, that was actually given to me by a friend of mine. It's called My 4-Year-Old, The Property Investor by Cam McClellan.
Okay.
And it's written from the perspective of this guy, Cam McClellan. He actually has his own buyer's agency. I think it's called Open Corp, Plug Open Corp.
Everyone's got a buyer's agency these days.
Anyway, that's right. A lot of Egyptians, apparently. I read that book, and that book's really great for anyone that's watching this. Like, it's written from the perspective of a father explaining property investing to his 4-year-old daughter.
Oh, so it's like an explain it like I'm 5, the subreddit.
Exactly, and that it was kind of like this whole Pandora's box. I'm like, wow, there's such depth to this topic and to this world. And yeah, so that's kind of how I started my journey. That I bought my first property, and at the time, I bought a duplex site because I want to buy a duplex site. That's what everyone wants to do.
Hey, don't worry about it. I'm building them soon.
I made it my business to understand investing from the ground up. I bought my first investment property in my own backyard in Greystanes because that's what you do when you just say, oh, okay, I'll buy my own backyard. That's what I'm most familiar with. Then,
CDC dupies everywhere.
and that's the thing. I haven't even developed it. I'm just sitting on it, but it's good block or what have you. And it's funny. The year I bought it, I found an article. My dad had sent me an article from 2018 saying Sydney worst property downturn in however many years, trying to basically scare me off.
Campaign.
Yeah. It was just funny. So I pulled the trigger, and then I went back to my broker, and I'm like, oh my God, that was so much fun. And I remember I signed the contract physically, not with DocuSign.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It wasn't even that long ago, like 7 years ago. And signed the contract, Greystanes Shops, and I remember how deflated I felt. And I was like, wow, I can't believe that's over. I loved it. I loved the whole process of it. And went back to my broker, and he told me, get fucked. You got no money and you have no equity, so go away. And then 12 months later, I went back to market, and I was like, oh, cool, I got 650,000. What am I going to do? Can't buy in Sydney. Then I started exploring the concept of investing interstate, Brisbane, ended up buying something there. And that's how the whole investing thing and the interstate portfolios built out. It was just out of necessity. I couldn't afford to buy in my own backyard anymore. So I was forced to look elsewhere.
So a lot of people in Sydney and in our personal inner circles, they face the same common pain point that you just brought up. They can't buy in their own backyard anymore. What are the most common pain points that you're seeing?
So I'd say the most common one, I'd say the biggest conundrum that they have is, I want to buy my own home to live in. And you would hear this all the time, right? I want to buy my home to live in, but I'm either scraping the bottom of the barrel, or I can't even buy something I really actually want to live in. So should I scrape in Sydney and buy something I don't want to live in? Or should I just consider buying an investment, right? So people are at that rent vesting crossroads. I would say that's the biggest conundrum, and you would see it just as much.
I actually had a rant, and I disagreed heavily with rent vesting for a period of time. But unfortunately, due to the lack of supply in Sydney, and Sydney being the largest economic hub of Australia, we don't have enough supply here. So we need people to consider rent vesting, because that's the fastest way to grow equity and not rely on cash savings to be able to purchase a property.
Yeah, and you really nailed it there, right? Because let's just say that someone decided that they were going to spend their 650 or 700 in Sydney. The problem with those assets is, number one, usually if you're buying a 650, 700K property, that's not the property you actually want to live in long term.
No.
You're just buying it to get in here.
It's a stepping stone.
It's a stepping stone. And the problem is that stepping stone is not going to give you the pace of growth that you need to keep up with the property that you really want to buy. So let's just say the property you want to buy today is worth $1.5 million, but you can't afford that. So you go, great, I'm going to buy a 700K property. If that 700K property is not in, a market where the supply is limited and there is strong demand for it, case in point, let's just say, an apartment in Parramatta, right? Not only are there a lot of apartments in Parramatta, right, but the differential between the cost of a unit and the cost of a house it's not in any way disparate in the same way it is like in Bondi. For example, a house in Bondi will cost you $5 million, but a unit will cost you $1.5 million. That's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Whereas in Parramatta, you can drive 10 minutes away and you can still buy a house for 1.5, but a unit will cost you 800 grand. That's not a huge difference. So therefore, the people haven't been forced into the unit market there yet.
Yeah, there's an oversupply.
Yes, there's an oversupply, right? So therein lies the problem. If you're going and buying an underperforming asset, you're doing yourself a disservice when you want to buy that home in the future, because you should really be buying a property that's going to at least keep up with the pace of growth of the $1.5 million house that you want in the future. I don't know if I've explained that well enough.
No, I get it. So basically, like, let's say you wanted to live in Parramatta and you wanted to buy that unit to live in, that's fine.
That's exactly right.
But if you wanted to actually grow your capital and all that sort of stuff, your equity, not a great idea.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. So anything I'm saying goes out the window if you actually want to live there, right? But usually what I see is people buying subpar properties or assets in order to get them to a place where those assets just aren't going to take them.
So the assets that you're assisting individuals with, they're either capital growth or they're cash flow positive, from what you're telling me. So when you're helping people try and buy in Sydney, but they don't have enough equity right now, they don't have enough funds. You're assisting them with purchasing an accelerated asset in another location so that 2-3 years' time, they'll have the funds to be able to purchase a Sydney.
That's right. And mind you, I'm agnostic as to where I buy. Like I'm not attached. Of course, I can't spread myself too thin. I can't be buying everywhere at once, but I have, I make it my business to understand where I want to buy based on a certain type of brief. So for example, if someone came to me $1.5 million, I would well and truly consider Sydney as a very viable investment, but they're a very viable option. But there are thresholds, right? If someone, naturally in my head, if someone comes to me and says, I've got 700 to spend, right? By default, there are not many assets I would buy in Sydney for 700 grand. But if someone said to me, 1.2, I go, okay, cool. There are some apartment markets that I would well and truly buy in. Like I own an apartment in Randwick that's performed really well, right? Because again, all the demand in that specific market, Randwick, Eastern Suburbs, what have you, or Northern Beaches is the same, right? Yeah. All the demand has come out of the housing market into the unit market.
Because it's more affordable.
Because it's completely unaffordable. Housing is completely unaffordable. Yeah, same thing. Yeah, exactly. But exact same point. So, but yes, I'm agnostic as to where I'm buying. So, usually what I'm doing is I'm buying in any, one of three locations at any one time. But usually the first two are the ones that I'm spending most of my time on. And that's just because of the nature of the type of people I work with. So, usually I have an area that I'm buying in that is, sole focus is on the capital growth. Then the second one is a balance of the yield or the cash flow and the growth. And then the third is just pure and utter cash flow. But I don't have many people in that third bucket because most people in their, most people that I know in my network and people that I work with are in their 20s, 30s, early 40s, and they're still in the accumulation, the build phase,
You said something there that I really liked. It was in regards to the yield. Could you just touch on that subject just a little bit more? Like you have people, they're just trying to ensure that they've got, enough cash flow to be able to maintain these sorts of properties. Yeah. Could you just get into that a little bit?
So one of my favorite things to say, and like I didn't come up with it, there's variations of it out there in the market is that, and I'm a firm believer in this, right? Capital growth is the game, but cash flow keeps you playing it.
Yes, I've seen that around.
Yeah, you've seen that around. Or some people say capital growth gets you out of the game.
I'm using that every day now. Wow. Okay, perfect.
And my point from that is that the whole point, and I feel really passionately about this, maybe even just as passionately about you and the Labor government, potentially. I don't know if I was supposed to say that. You talk about it all the time. Why you look so blank?
No. It wasn't a negative thing. It was more of a Labor government.
Don't say that around me.
You triggered him.
He must not be named.
We've only got 30 minutes, man, and you don't want me to go
Don't get him started.
So, I firmly believe that capital growth is the point of property investing.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a good kind of analogy, and usually when I say this, it makes even more sense to people, right? Very rarely will you find people our age or people that are building their asset base, who are not absolutely minted, going and buying stocks like CBA, BHP, Rio Tinto, AT&T, Coca-Cola. Yeah. Why? Because they are dividend yield stocks. They pay an income. Yeah. Right? You go and dump $1 million into one of those stocks, you get a really good cash return to dividend every year, right? Yeah. But there is a very strong reason why everyone our age are in the accumulation phase, are buying Google, Amazon, Tesla. Why? Because they want to buy in at 10 and sell out at 20. And that is capital growth. So why would people treat the way they invest in property differently to the way they invest in the share market?
Correct.
Right? Because the point is growth. So yes, yield is important. Cash flow is important because we don't want to go broke, right? If I could buy vacant blocks of land and sit on them, I would do it. Yeah. But why? I can't do it because I'll literally...
You need cash flow.
I need cash flow. So to me, the point of the dwelling is just to provide an income. Yeah. The value is in the land appreciates, the building depreciates.
Yeah.
Just, I do want to ask you one thing. So my first investment, I'm just going to highlight this, was an apartment in Wollongong.
Yep.
Okay, 3-bedroom apartment. It did well because it was a 3-bedder. I didn't buy a 2-bedder. And I bought it off the plan and great builder, everything was fine. That was both cash flow positive and it achieved, I'm not going to say tremendous capital growth, but it achieved good capital growth in the time. What we're trying to see now, or what we are seeing, is a lot more people be under the age of 30 or under the age of 40. They're more accepting to the risk because they know the reward on the other side of it is better off. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, look, it all comes down to what are people comfortable with. For example, I'll never say to someone, you should be definitely 2 or 3 grand out of pocket per month on this property, because at the end of the day, everyone's circumstances are different.
Yeah.
So the simple question I ask people is, based on your current expenses, what, in addition to this, can you afford to cash flow out of pocket? And if the answer is nothing, JP, I need the property to be neutrally geared, then that is okay. As long as you're being truthful with yourself around what your comfort level is. So, to your point, a lot more people are becoming more comfortable being a little bit out of pocket because they're,
Delayed gratification.
They're starting to understand that, okay, well, the point of buying this investment property or you're buying this investment in general is that hopefully it will either help me get to that family home one day when I build equity, or I can build equity, I can continue to reinvest into, the growth of the portfolio, right? Because that's the beautiful thing about property is that when we put $100,000 into the property market, we don't get $100,000 in the market as we would with shares, right? We get $1 million.
You get a return on capital.
Exactly right. You get a return on your, a $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 asset, which is the beauty of property. And then when you add additional properties to the portfolio, you're not just, again, adding another 100 grand, you're adding another $1 million, right? So every time you have this small amount to deploy, the bank's giving you this much, which is the beauty of leverage and why people are now starting to go, okay, well, I'm not going to be hell-bent on my yield or my positive cash flow or what have you, but I'm going to focus on the growth. And I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there around yield and cash flow. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm not claiming to know everyone's situation or say that people should be out of pocket, but I think that people need to know that, if you have 2 people and one of them has got a neutrally geared or a positively geared property that hasn't grown in value, and you've got this guy who's got a property that's been out of pocket $1,500 a month for the same amount of time, this guy who was out of pocket will say, oh my God, great investment, it's doubled in value. This guy will always come back and go, oh, it was shit. Even though it was paying itself off, it hasn't grown in value. Like, well, not shit, but my point being is it's opportunity cost.
Yeah.
We only have a couple of purchases we can make.
You and I are both very Arab. At every Sunday barbecue, we hear it. We hear, I'm doing this and this is how much money this person made on this site, or this is how much money they made on this investment in Perth or WA or Victoria or Queensland. So it is Australia's so property obsessed, but we do need to be able to facilitate that. And I feel like, as you said, there is a lot of misinformation out there that does push people in the wrong directions. How do you push through that misinformation? How do you implement data to show your clients this is the area to achieve this goal?
Yeah.
And we can recommend 1, 2, 3 properties.
Yeah. Nothing I ever tell you or ask you or recommend to you will ever be based on gut feeling. Everything will always be grounded in data. And I will say from day one, I will swear by it, that if I ever say anything to you and you come to me and say, JP, have you got the data to back that up? And I will show you a graph, a metric, a chart that will speak to the narrative as to what I'm telling you, right? So, for me, like, the data is super important because it truly means that I am agnostic and I'm not applying any sort of gut feeling or this is how I feel about that market. No, I'm literally looking at the data to make observations. And, I used to think, and don't get me wrong, this stuff is still important, but I used to think it still matters, but not as much as I used to think it does, right? Infrastructure, where's the nearest train station, the shopping centre.
You're taking shots at me, bro.
Oh, sorry. Shit, cut it out. No. Look, I guess my point is that's...
No. I'm enjoying this. You're challenging me because this is my big thing.
That stuff is important, but I think the interesting part of it about that is, for example, like let's take a simple one like a train station or amenities or what have you, right? Think about, and I'm trying to think of an area around here, like Lugano. 90% owner-occupiers, very, very strong capital growth, very desirable area to live. I don't think there's a lot of infrastructure in Lugano. I don't think there's not a lot of infrastructure in Dural, in Kenhurst.
Yeah, no, there isn't. I'm from Druit.
Right. So my point is that there's just some fallacies in some of these beliefs. Again, not saying that they don't matter or they're not important, but there is so much more. There's so much deeper levels of data: stock on market percentage, inventory levels, hold periods, affordability indexes for demand, socioeconomics. Like there's a for example, there's a socioeconomic index that's released by the ABS. That's called the IRSAD, which is the Index of Relative Socioeconomic Advantage and Disadvantage. Like, as in, these are not. Yes, of course, I want to know that, like, Melton City Council is building a brand new hospital. Is that going to bring a lot of jobs to the area and a lot more people who are going to live close by? Of course, right? But my point is, there is a lot more data available that speaks to even even deeper what is actually going on in these areas.
Time on market, is it investor or is it a lot more owner occupiers in the area? Is it families? You know, how long are people owning their dwellings?
Exactly right. Whole periods. Exactly right. Bang on.
I'm curious because I had this thought. I was having a conversation with my dad the other day, and we were talking about property prices and stuff, and yada yada, the usual thing. Young people can't get into the market, but he was saying, why don't they just buy Mount Druit? You can find houses there that are $300,000-$400,000 just to get you started. Would you recommend something like that? Because I know Mount Druit is not exactly.
Let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
Mount Druit. So I did a video on this the other day.
Yeah.
Mount Druit has outpaced cash, okay, by 20% since 2020.
What is outpaced cash? Sorry, I don't know.
The growth. So let's say you had $50,000 in 2020. Today it'd be worth $60,000 because of inflation.
Oh, right.
Mount Druit has outpaced that by over 20%. Okay. So Mount Druit as a market, there are no houses for $300,000, $400,000 there anymore. It's all apartments. And the median house price in Mount Druit right now, and thank you for bringing this up because I did a video on it the other day and I feel like a genius now, is $958,000.
Wow. Yeah, crazy.
$958,000. Please show your father that. This is I'm not saying the issue with your father. Love your dad, great guy.
But isn't that funny how like what would have been considered and branded one of the worst suburbs in the country by, you know, it's you know,
just
whatever.
by its reputation.
Yeah, its reputation like has, and a mate of mine bought there, he invested in property even long before I did. He bought there for like 350 grand.
Yeah.
It was worth like $1 million.
Yeah.
I've got even better than that. There was a mansion that sold in Mount Druit for $2.3 million.
I think I saw that.
$2.3 million.
Blew my mind.
But you look at the area. The median income level is like $1,400 per week. Like that's the median household income. So you're seeing a 47% rental rate in that location, and you think to yourself, okay, the people that are renting there are just going to get pushed out even further. You're going to have a lot more individuals who live in Sydney at the moment. You know, I know my kids now. They're going to have to look at Mount Druit as a desirable area in 20 years' time because in 20 years' time, the individuals who suffer socioeconomically and don't have the advantages that other people do, they're going to get pushed out of the market and they are going to be pushed towards regional towns like Toowoomba, for example. They might get pushed out there, or they might get pushed out to another regional town like Clifton, for example, or they might have to go to Mildura. It's starting to become a market where if you take advantage of the land, because I always mention this, there's always a limited supply of land in Sydney. We've got the beach here, we've got the Blue Mountains here, everything in between. It's winner take all kind of thing. If you can take advantage of the land, you will accelerate your wealth quickly. Just take that example of Mount Druit. You know, median house price $633 in 2020. Median house price now $958 or whatever it is.
So yeah, because I'm looking at the now. So you can buy an apartment in Mount Druit for about $400,000. That's pretty consistent throughout. And I saw there's a few of them. They call them villas on here. I don't know what that like. I'm assuming they're like townhouses and duplexes. They're around 600.
It might be like a granny flat.
Could be a granny
subdivided.
flat. Yeah. There were 3-bedroom things, and they're around 600 to 650. And then once you start getting to actual houses, it's going 750 plus.
So, for example, the villa, that's already been subdivided. You can't make improvements on the land.
Exactly, yeah.
So when people say, oh, but you could get a villa for this much, that's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. However, you are still unable to do anything extra to your property.
Yeah.
When you have a house, land, freehold title, that's when you...
Well, that's the big capital growth.
Yeah, that's the big capital growth. And that's the stuff that we started to see really spiking value in Mount Druit.
Yeah.
We have dragged on that topic for a little bit. I do want to ask you, Queensland or Victoria right now?
Oh.
It's $1 million question.
How long have we got? No, I'm kidding. Okay, so I'm a huge fan of and look, again, property's not about timing the market, but I'm a big fan of understanding property cycles and where each markets are at. And look, the reason why that's important for me is because every one of my investors, well, not every single one, but a lot of them have different time frames. I sometimes get people say to me, I need as much growth as I can get in 24 months. Believe it or not, and I need to sell the asset. But like, believe it or not, I get people like that who are like, oh, my time horizon is 2-3 years. But then for the most part, people are medium to long term, right? Yeah. But it's important for me to understand because where I buy for someone that's got a 5-year time horizon or a 4-year time horizon is very different for someone that's got 10, 15 years behind them to let the asset grow, right? So Queensland or Victoria. So some context or some background on that, right? And I actually went up to watch, to see a guy speak. His name's Michael Matusik. He's a like a very well-known property market analyst and commentator. Flew up to Brizzy for one of his workshops, and he talked a lot about Southeast Queensland. But essentially what we've seen in Southeast Queensland in particular, if we're talking about Queensland, but Southeast Queensland, let's hone in on that, is we've seen more or less 9 or 10 years of growth in a 4 or 5 year period.
Yeah, that's
Like
what I've heard.
astronomical. Like I bought a property in Tingalpa in Brisbane in 2021 for 670,000. I just got it revalued at 1.27 million or something like that.
530,000.
In 2021, I bought it. That's absurd.
4 years.
4 years, right? So again, that alone doesn't tell you the story. So that data point alone, on its own, does not tell us the story that, this area is going to cap out. But then if you go and have a look at the affordability index for those same suburbs or those areas, and you see, cool, it was somewhat affordable, tracking up. Then from like 2021, it's gone like this. All of a sudden, the years to own have gone from 35 to 45, 50 years to pay off a mortgage. You start to go, okay, well, at some point, people are going to start to cap out. And once we get to this 45 year window, 40 to 45 years window of takes them to pay a mortgage off, that's the threshold for it's getting stretched now, which means that is going to slow the demand, right? So it was definitely undervalued before in the same way that Perth was probably undervalued, didn't do anything for a really long time. But now I believe, and again, this is not just my opinion, like there are other like commentators out there that believe the same thing, is that I believe that Southeast Queensland is like a bit overvalued, and I'm not saying there will be negative price pressure, but I believe it will just be not as strong as somewhere like a Melbourne, which, for example, from 2012 to 2022, right, doubled in value, right? So it did 100% growth. From 2022 until now, it's down about 3 to 5%. Victoria was the only state in the country where housing affordability got better over the last 3 or 4 years. That's the craziest thing to think, because all we've been hearing about, housing affordability, it's been terrible, right? Victoria got better. Not only that, but PropTrack had released some data last year, and that's why I started buying in Melbourne like 12 months ago, is because PropTrack also came out with some data that said the amount of new lending commitments from in Victoria was higher than any other state. So above WA, Queensland, New South Wales, whatever the other states are.
All the rest.
Before I miss one. So big fan of Victoria. I believe it's undervalued. The long and the short of it is it's deviated from its long-term growth pattern in the short term, which is a good thing, because then you go, cool, the long-term pattern's good, but the short term is shit. Therefore, that presents an opportunity. It should revert back to its...
Yeah, because like it doing that, it's sort of a sign of a healthy market, isn't it?
It's the sign of a market that has that naturally will, there is going to be pent up demand.
Yeah,
it just goes like this for whatever reason. It just does.
It does.
So some of my wealthiest clients are from Melbourne, and the debt on their owner occupied property or their principal place of residency is so much lower than what they have to pay in New South Wales. Yet they own and operate businesses in this state. So we have seen a little bit of a migration down there, because you're able to purchase houses in Hawthorne. You're able to purchase houses in Druit, very expensive, prestigious areas for 40% less or 50% less than what you can buy in New South Wales. They're $1 million ring. So Sydney's $1 million ring, I think extends. I think it's a 40-kilometer radius.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's basically the whole city.
It's 45 minutes outside of Sydney, and then CBD. And once you're 45 minutes outside of Sydney CBD, you're either north of Hornsby or towards
Penrith.
Or Penrith. Theirs is only a 15-minute circle.
It's like 10Ks. It's like no joke, 10K. Like I just bought a property at auction for a client, 430 square meters in Pascoe Vale South, which is 7 kilometers out from the CBD.
Oh. Nothing.
3-bed, 1 bath for 1.1 million. 7 kilometers out in a very just like crazy. 7Ks out, nuts. In a really good pocket.
Crying in Sydney.
No, but I just hear that, and I might be fake crying. I'm excited about that opportunity, because I'm looking at it and I'm like, they're going to have a massive owner-occupied state, which is a good thing, because the more owner-occupiers there are in a location, the more people reinvest into that area and focus on the upkeep and focus on the improvements.
Yeah, look infrastructure and stuff like that.
Well, outside of that, just even look at Rose Bay's council. Okay, Rose Bay, you go down there, all the streets are nice.
Oh,
Everything's
I love Rose Bay,
pretty.
man.
The grass
I
is
love Rose
mowed.
Bay.
You don't see
So
any.
beautiful.
You don't see any issues, but that's because it's an owner-occupied area. You don't see people. Oh yeah, I'm going to buy an investment property in Rose Bay. Here's my $1.8 million deposit for an $18 million house. No, they want to live there.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to see is Victoria. It might not look like it now, but what you're going to see is Victoria actually improve socioeconomically because people are going to be focusing on improving where they live. All right, JP, you and I could talk for about 20 hours about all this stuff. So I'm going to get you on again. I need to get you on again because, bro, you are untapped when it comes to like how much knowledge you got.
Stop
man.
it.
Like,
I'm blushing over here.
I've got to get in there, you know. So few questions. So I like to do. Well, I don't like to do. This is the first time I've done this segment.
That's gone.
I borrowed this from my good friend Melissa, who's also a broker, who is, I was on her podcast, but she did a rapid fire question segment. And I actually love this. So I'm going to start shooting off some rapid fire questions. And you just tell me the answer to it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's go. Should you pay off your debt off early?
No, you're better off buying another investment to pay down that debt quicker than you would if you were paying your principal down.
Fantastic. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Beach holiday or city escape?
Ooh. Beach, just.
Favorite guilty pleasure TV show?
Oh, shit, I was just watching Severance. That was
I heard that's quite good.
Unbelievable.
My wife's
Great
been watching
show.
it every day, I think.
Oh, mate, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's the first couple episodes are slow, but it's unreal.
Favorite drink after work?
Ooh.
Doesn't have to be alcohol.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to be alcoholic. I have to have my cup of tea before bed.
Okay.
So
And
coffee.
final question. Pitch yourself in 3 emojis.
Starry-eyed emoji.
Yep.
Banana. I don't know why.
It's not an eggplant, it's a banana.
I don't know why. It just came to my head. Third emoji. The sideways laugh crying one.
Okay, all right.
You know that one? Ruffle a mayo.
in our practice round, I said eggplant splash peach.
Clip that. That's gone on socials.
Done. Anyways, guys, thank you all so much for listening to the Finance Show with Joe. As always, if you need any assistance with your finance, whether you're looking to refinance, whether you're looking to invest, whether you're looking to tap into some equity or you need a debt consolidate, you can contact us at www.itsimple.com.au. JP, throw us in your plugs.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. If you want to find me, investor.com.au, invest and the letter R, or you can hit me up on my socials, Investor Property on Instagram and even on LinkedIn, JP Gabriel. I post a lot of like thought leadership and educational content there too. So
Nice.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll see you next time.